Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everyone, I am really excited to introduce today's guest. Silicon Valley executive coach and Stanford University Graduate School of Business facilitator Luis Velasquez epitomizes resilience. He sharpens the acumen of leaders worldwide, guiding them to turn challenges into opportunities. He is the author of the best-selling book, Ordinary Resilience: Rethinking How Effective Leaders Adapt and Thrive. His strategic thinking is regularly published by the Harvard Business Review and Fast Company and is spotlighted in Forbes, also in Dorie Clark's The Long Game and Ludmila Proslova's The Canary Code, and in yours truly's book, Work from the Inside Out. Luis is not only an advocate for resilience, but a living testament to it. He was born and raised in poverty in a country riddled by civil war. He's an ultra-marathoner and Ironman triathlete, having tackled the Western States 100-mile endurance run. He is also a brain tumor survivor, showcasing unparalleled commitment, persistence, and optimism. Family lies at the heart of his drive. Together with his wife, they're raising two children whom they hope will become two kind, confident, and resilient humans, mirroring the principles he champions. Please join me in welcoming Luis Velasquez. Welcome, Luis.
I mean, it's an honor to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And listening to the way they introduce me, I am not all that. It makes me blush sometimes. So thank you.
Well, it's okay. You know, all of those things are true. I know it because I've known you for some time now. We've met in person, even though we are located at opposite sides of the country. You're on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast. And you were a guest on one of the earlier episodes of this podcast. I think it was episode 35. And we called that episode Adapt and Thrive, which is part of the title of your current book. And, you know, I've been a fan of yours for a long time. I've known your story. We told your story in that original episode, and I encourage people to go back and listen to it or to read about it in my book. And of course, I want to encourage them to get Ordinary Resilience as well, because I think there are many, many lessons that people can take from your work and your story that can give them good illustration of different ways that people find their ways through life and through learning how to make meaning, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I love the title of your work, the Work from the Inside Out, because that's what resilience is. You know, it's depending on ourselves and what we already have within to affect whatever is facing whatever is affecting us at that moment. But it always comes from the inside out. So I think that, you know, the title of your book is very, very clever.
Well, thank you. Well, you know, it's interesting to hear you characterize it sort of aligned with resilience. Let's take a look there a little bit further, because resilience is a word that gets thrown around a lot these days. You know, we live in very challenging times, and people are trying to, I think, find that resilience within themselves. And yet we want to go beyond that resilience to really make a difference, make a life for ourselves, make a life for others. As we said, you know, in the intro about, you know, family lying at the heart of your drive. But tell us more about resilience from the inside out. And when did you first notice? Maybe you didn't have the word for it, but when did you first notice that you were resilient?
I didn't notice it myself. People told me, you're so resilient and you're so resilient. So, sometimes I tell my story and I tell, how I was, raised in Guatemala in a country that was riddled by war. I escaped the environment and came here to the United States on a scholarship, not knowing a word of English. I enrolled in a community college, no knowing English.
That's amazing.
With a couple of other people, and what we'll do is we translate their books in from English to Spanish so we can actually study. Um, as you know, I got a brain tumor. I survived that brain tumor, but neither my professional dreams nor my marriage survived.
Right.
The point that I'm trying to make here is that there were so many things that happened in my life, but I just managed. I just did what it was natural to me. And it wasn't until people started telling me, how do you do it? How do you do it? That the question is, I started asking myself that question. And at one point, I was reading a book that is called Plan B.
Plan B,
by Adam Grant and what is the name of the Facebook lady?
I know who you mean.
Yes, you know who I'm talking about.
Yes, and I'm blanking too.
Yes, and they were talking about resilience, but a type of resilience that is not just endurance, but is a resilience that brings and makes people stronger and better as a result of the whatever they're going through, right? And despite of whatever they're going through. And I realized this is what is me. This is what happened to me. This is me. And so that's what I made the connection of who I was and what I've been through with the resilience concept. Now, what you mentioned earlier is, that the resilience is a word that is, thrown around.
Yeah.
And the reality is that if you ask different people what resilience is, they will give you a different,
right,
completely different, what I call, meanings.
Right.
And the most common is the idea that you can bounce back, or that you can face whatever you're facing and coming back and return to the original state.
Yeah.
The way I see that is an outcome, is no resilience per se.
I agree. Yeah.
So as I started to reflect on my journey and the journey of others, and I started coaching, I started to realize that resilience is an outcome, but it's also a process. And process itself has three components. Number one is commitment. Number two is persistence. And number three is optimism. So, and the beauty about those three things is that we already have them. So resilience is not something that you acquire, it's something you unlock. But we all have the capacity to get better at something. And the way we can do that is if we are committed to something, we are persistent, and we're about the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the way you just outlined that, and also putting that in contrast to endurance. There's a difference, right? As you would know, being an ultra marathoner, there's the endurance of running 100 miles, right? And that's really different.
It is. If you think about this, the way I see it is, to be truly resilient, those three elements have to happen.
Yeah.
And here is why. If you are just committed and persistent, you have grit, but there is no movement. You just adapt. You see, and you're fiber, and that's it.
Right.
And that is a lot of times what I see in organizations or people that are like committed to the work and they are working so hard, but that is a recipe for burnout.
Yes. Yes.
But if you throw in the optimism,
Yeah.
like this is temporary. I
Right.
am in 2 years and a year, I'm gonna be better. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
That is almost like a North Star that
Yeah.
allows us to move forward
Right.
rather than staying in a place that we don't like to be anyway.
Right. That notion of, as you said a moment ago, looking to the future,
Correct.
right? And seeing that the difference between no movement and movement, but really looking forward to something. Yeah.
That I love what you say, but the difference between movement and moving forward.
Yes. Yeah. Because you could spin in the same place too. You could get in a centrifuge, right? Although even then something happens, right? And I do want to mention that part of your story includes that once you learned English, which you pretty much learned by immersing yourself, you did go all the way through higher education and got a PhD in botanic sciences. Am I getting that correctly?
Yeah, yeah, actually it's a dual PhD. One is in uh, molecular plant pathology and botany.
Okay. I was close enough. And so, the work that you're doing today as an executive coach and all the writing that you're doing and working with leaders and teams is a big departure from what you have your doctorate in. And a big part of that was you had a little interruption in there.
Yeah, that's right. The tumor was a big interruption in there,
It was
but
a big interruption.
it is the way I do it. From the outside, there are two different things. Like working with plants and now working with people. Working with inanimate things. We're now working with people that have issues of emotions, etc.
Right.
Yeah. Uh, the way I see it, I mean, I think that there is a lot of things that we learn that can be applicable for other things.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Transferable skills, you want to call it. The world doesn't belong to people that know the most, but to people that learn to adapt the fastest.
Right. Right.
And when I look at, the way I coach, that there is a lot of learnings that I did during my PhD that apply to human behavior.
Sure.
Experimenting, like moving things around, like
Mm-hmm.
planning the experiments. And there's
Yeah.
so many things there are so many parallels,
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
and I think that the one thing that I see now in the world is that we are in a constant learning mode.
Yes.
What we know soon becomes obsolete. They become
Yeah.
mesofacts. I mean,
Yeah.
my daughter asked me one day not long ago, and she said to me, Daddy, how many people are in the world? And I confidently told her, oh, I think it's about 6 billion.
Yeah.
Because that's the way I learned it.
Yeah.
That's her. And then a couple of days later, she came and said, Daddy, you lied to me. It's not
Oh,
6 million. It's much more than that. It's about that. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I think that is the issue that many of us commit, is that we learn things and we get stagnant with the knowledge that we have, and we don't learn new things,
mhm.
And we all have the capacity to learn
Yes.
and get better and change careers and do
Right.
something different, because the best way to do that is when you're when you have a beginner's mind.
Absolutely. The thing is, for some reason, some people, I wonder about this, if some people are just more curious than others. I'm not sure about that, but there are some people who seem to be quite content to go about their lives doing pretty much the same things every day. and don't really want a lot to change. They don't like change. They don't want to incorporate a lot of new information. I don't think there's a lot of people like that, but there are some. But I think that, the people that are probably listening to this and are interested in your work and my work are probably looking for something new and thinking about what would that look like, or how do I even begin to think about what that would look like, and how do I fit into that? And I think that's what I love about your story and your book, because you provide a context for how people can be thinking about that. And I know the title is Rethinking How Effective Leaders Adapt and Thrive, but aren't we all our own leaders in some respects? There's ways in which we can talk about this for ourselves and what we want to take ourselves going through our lives, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. The way I think about it is that we all, as I said, and I keep repeating this because I think that this is the biggest aha moment that I had, is that
Yeah,
we all have the capacity to shift the way we think. And
yeah,
we do it all the time. Where sometimes, we go to a movie, I don't like the movie, let's go watch the other one. So we can change our minds,
yes,
on the simple things,
yeah.
and so I think that there is a say that, the biggest gift that life has given us is the power of choice.
Ah,
And if we don't like something, then you can change it.
yeah, yes,
Or you start by actually taking the steps to change it.
right.
There is a adage. What is it? If you don't like where you're planted, move. You're not a tree or something. When I was growing up, my dad had a question that annoyed the hell out of me and my brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
He said, "What are you gonna do about that?"
What do you want to
Because
do
if
about
I
that?
didn't like something, I say, and he will say, "Well, what are you gonna do about that? What are you that?" And that is a question that I now ask myself all the time. And that's a question that I ask my clients all the time,
Yeah,
when they start, telling me I don't like this, complaining more.
yeah,
And my simple question is, what are you going to do about that?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because we all have the capacity to do something about how we feel.
Yes.
Perhaps we cannot change the outside, but to your point in your book, we can make a decision about how we feel about things and moving forward.
And the doing might be just thinking. How do you want to think about that? Because oftentimes it's the mindset. It's all, how are you thinking about that? If you want to think that thing that you've decided is a challenge is just something that can't be repaired or changed, well, then that's the way it's going to be. If
Absolutely.
you want to change your mind about it, what would be even a shift? What would be a quick little shift you could change your mind about that? And I'm curious because I think what we're talking about here are the kinds of things that do lead to what you're talking about when you say ordinary resilience. I'm curious why the word ordinary in your book title.
For the same reason that I explained earlier, is that resilience is already within us. It's not
Okay,
extraordinary.
I
It's
see.
not something that is reserved for endurance athletes or people that have gone through brain tumors or whatnot.
Right.
We all
Okay.
have the capacity to do that. The only thing that we need to do is make a commitment. In
Yeah.
other words, you don't need to have gone through a brain tumor to unlock your resilience.
Right.
A few years ago, I was teaching a class at Stanford University, and we were talking about diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
Was this particular student there? She was a very accomplished individual. She already had a nonprofit, and she was her career was taking off, and she was so passionate about diversity and inclusion. Yeah, this woman, oh my gosh, So I asked her, I said, "Why? Can I ask you where this passion for diversity and inclusion came from?" And she said to me, I grew up in the Midwest, and everybody in my town looked like me. She was a white person, and then she moved to Chicago, and she went to a more integrated school.
Yeah.
Uh, she had a hard time there,
Mm-hmm.
and I am thinking, that's it. That is the big thing that allow you to do all the great things that you're doing now. And to me, then I realized that it was a big lesson for me, because the experience is irrelevant. The outcome is important.
Uh-huh.
So my brain tumor might be extreme to somebody, her experience is extreme to her. And
Yeah.
I think that the key here is to find that moment that is going to help us to, okay, this is a reset. This is the moment that is going to allow me to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
keep telling people, when I coach individuals, and I ask them, what is, if they're losing a job, or they were passed for promotion, or they lose the funding, I say, well, this is a reset moment. Let's use this moment as a catalyst for the
Right.
next version of you.
Right. Right.
And that's what I call it ordinary resilience, because it is ordinary. We all have these moments. We
Mm-hmm.
just need to make a decision about a commitment, a decision about that moment, and then move forward.
Right. No, I get it. That makes perfect sense. And so, threaded throughout your book, there are scenarios and stories that you share about different people that you've worked with,
Mm.
and how they have used their ordinary resilience and moved through. Is there any one example that would be good to share with our audience that might whet their appetite?
So if you look at all the stories, there is one thread
Yeah.
about that, is that when people see things differently, when we see things differently, then we start thinking differently.
Mm-hmm.
And when we think differently, then we can start acting differently.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the essence of resilience, is that you see the possibilities, and
Mm-hmm.
then you act differently. And a lot of times, a lot of clients or a lot of people that I see is that they feel they have no choice.
Oh, right, right.
I have no choice. This is the way it is.
Yeah, I had no choice. I hear that a lot. Yeah.
And I think that making the decision that there is no choice is a choice itself.
Yes. Yes.
So looking at this, and the way, so there was one person that she was a biotech director,
Mm-hmm.
and she was hard time meeting with her boss. Her boss, she was literally, she saw herself as incompetent.
Oh, wow.
And she saw herself as no potential, and she was a hard time, staying in that job. And then I asked her, where are you getting this information? How do you know that you're failing? And they said, my boss tells me, our boss tells me. And I am like, okay, we need to let's figure out other points of, data that you might have.
Yeah.
And she had the data.
Yeah.
Everybody else tell her that she's great, she does things, but she didn't believe them except her boss.
Mm.
And then the boss left, not left, but it was moved to a different organization, and another boss came in, and he realized that this woman was an amazing individual, and gave her some positive feedback. Oh my God, you should see the change.
Wow.
The here is that sometimes we believe what we want to believe. In
Yeah.
her case, that's what. So I told her, we need to start looking at the data and taking feedback as data. And
Yeah.
the things that are liars, this just move them along, because those are not, they don't fit
Right.
on the trend.
Right. Right.
And if you see the stories of the book, a lot of times is people see things differently, and they say, oh my gosh, and then they kind of start thinking differently and act differently. I have a CTO, 57 years old, ex-Marine from Eastern Europe,
Wow.
very, very harsh with people, he wanted to drive them and blah, blah, blah. And then, we went through the coaching, and then, I told him, later he said, Luis, I cannot believe I am almost 60 years old. And this is the first time I'm learning about soft skills, and I'm learning about the impact that my actions have. So a lot of us don't know
Yeah.
what we don't know.
Yeah. No, I agree. I totally agree. I think, a lot of what you're talking about, of course, are things that, to me, it's like that's it's like my day-to-day life, those kinds of ideas, right? But this is the thing I want to drive this point home is there may be something that you or I or someone here listening, they know very, very well, and they assume everyone else knows it really well too. And here you are with a CTO, 57 years old, who for the first time is really understanding what his impact is on other people at a, what we call the soft skills level, even though I think they're the most impactful skills of all. But I think oftentimes we think that what we know everyone else knows already, and they don't. And it's not about assuming people don't do or don't know anything, but there are ways in which we can, I think, engage with people and with ourselves too, right? To be able to bring out the best in ourselves. And I think the other piece to this is something you brought up earlier is about, always being in learning mode, because that I think is key I think that's key to resilience as you're describing it. It's definitely key to adapting and thriving for sure. And staying, I always tell people, stay open and curious. And I know that doesn't just come from me. I know there are other people who say that. I think too often there are those folks who think they don't have a choice. I didn't have a choice. This is just the way it is. I can't do anything about it. And they've written some book of rules that really they did not need to open. And they could be making lots of choices. And sometimes the choices you have in front of you may not be all that appealing. There may be a whole bunch of choices in a situation and you don't like any of them. But when you are the one getting to make a choice, you're going to carry that forward in a whole different way than if you think someone else made the choice for you.
Absolutely. And that's the key. It's about the resilience of agency.
Yes. Yeah.
Resilience is about you making your own decisions,
Yeah.
and you making your own choices. And even if somebody makes the choice for you, it is you to accept it or do it in a way that you don't want to do it. You see what I'm saying? So, a few it's been a while. I think about maybe a year or 2 years ago, I found myself opening the refrigerator for no reason. I opened the refrigerator, and I asked myself, why am I opening the refrigerator? Why? And so then I decided, I'm going to start questioning, why do I do things? And so why do I am picking up my phone? Why? And I think that question allowed me to be more intentional about the things I do. And sometimes a lot of us, we are in automatic. We just live the way you mentioned, we just live the way we live. We wake up and we don't question why the things. And the minute we start questioning why, then we're going to make better decisions.
Yeah. And they may just be better for us. It's not about anyone else at that point. And yet at the same time, there are plenty of times when we may have a whole pile of choices in front of us, and we do have to think about other people in the process, but it still is a choice that we can take some ownership of. And I think the more that we can take that ownership, I think the more powerfully we can go forward. I know we're talking, somewhat circumspect here about some of this, but it does apply in so many ways to the choices we make about work, how we spend our days, how we set our priorities. I'm curious, this book was a real labor of love for you. I know we've been talking about you writing this book for a long time, and um and I knew it was coming. I was looking forward to it coming out. And so I'm curious, though, what made you decide to write the book, and what was it like? What was the process like for you to put this together and put it out into the world?
So I think that the book started not as a book.
Ah,
As I mentioned earlier, I mean, I just wanted to understand myself. What is it that I do that is different? So what that allows me to go through the world in difficult circumstances and just come up in the other side. Well, and I don't know if I shared with you, but my dad had a similar experience as well. He had a horrible, horrible, horrible accident when I was like 12 or 13 years old.
oh,
And at that time, we were really poor. We didn't have anything. I mean, I think sometimes people ask, what are we going to have for breakfast? Sometimes we question, are we going to have breakfast today?
right.
And when he was recovering, he made a commitment and he said, I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna have my own business. I'm gonna buy a house. I'm gonna send university. I'm gonna buy a house to my daughters. And my mom and I were laughing, I'm on all these hard times because you couldn't do it when you were healthy. How are you gonna do it now?
Hmm.
Okay, but he did it. He became very successful. I mean, just to give you an example, when I was growing up, sometimes we didn't have breakfast. When my little sister, went to college, he bought her a house and a car.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it was a completely different perspective. So when I was going through the brain tumor and everything else, I had that inspiration of my dad, but I also wanted to get better. And when I got better, and I started to reflect on what is it about the things that we did.
Yeah.
And one day, Tammy, I found myself sitting in a table with Jim Kouzes. You know who Jim Kouzes is?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Jim Kouzes,
The
the
leadership
author.
challenge.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
leadership challenge. And I was telling him the story that I'm telling you now,
Yeah.
similar to. And he said to me, Luis, you need to write. You need to write a book. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And then I'm not a writer. I say, just write your stories. Write your stories.
Yeah.
And I journal a lot. So I have plenty of stories. So I pick up a bunch of them, they were completely disconnected from each other. There's just stories. I did this, I did that, completely disconnected. And he and I met. And then he said, well, obviously, I'm not going to have time to go through stories, but tell me about this. Tell me about that. Tell me about this. And as we went through the pile of stories, 5 piles became evident.
Wow.
And I'm like, and he said, that's your book. And those are what I call the pillars of resilience. The pillars of resilience is, number one is embrace the suck. Is embrace the challenge, embrace where you are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of times I hear people saying, oh, if I had that, oh, I'm going to do better when I have that.
Yeah.
If I had, the reality is that the present is all we have.
Right.
And the we accept that is when we start making decisions to get better.
Yeah.
So when I was going through the brain tumor, I remember that I was equating my identity with the person that I was before. I was a professor. I was married to a beautiful, amazing woman. At that moment, I didn't have any of those things. So I was questioning my identity. And the minute I accepted who I was, tumor included, that's when I started moving forward. So that's the first pillar, is accepting where you are. Second pillar is facing your fears.
Mm-hmm.
See, and I have a mantra for that. The mantra is like, I don't seek to be fearless, but to fear less.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, we see things that are so hard.
Yeah.
And if you make a small attempt today, you're going to get one step forward. And if you another attempt, and then all of a sudden, it's, the power of compound. Nobody, I can guarantee you that nobody has done a big things in one leap.
No,
It's a
that's right. Yeah.
So no fear. The other pillar of resilience is relationship building.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about this, there is no way we are creatures of community.
Yeah.
And my dad used to tell me, that when he was in the hospital, before he was making this decision, he said, I wanted to kill myself, but I never was able to do it because I was never alone. There
Huh.
were always people with him. You see, when I look at all the pivotal moments of my life, I realize that at any single pivotal moment of my life, there is one person involved. Someone challenged me, someone gave me an opportunity, someone pushed me, someone criticized me. And those are relationships that we need to do that, and we don't do that intentionally.
Right. Right.
Number 4 is about unlock your inner potential.
Mm.
And yes, we need to work out to get better. Yes, we need to meditate to be more calm. Yes, we do that. But what you have right now is what you get, is what you have.
Right.
And we already have everything we need to take the
Yeah.
first step.
Yeah.
And finally, is everything that we do has to have a purpose.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we're not all that, but we have significance to others.
Yes.
Therefore, we have to have some sort of purpose. And I remember how I found, that particular component is, I was in Houston thinking about ending my life, when I was at the bottom of my journey during the brain tumor. And I remember, having the middle of the night, thinking about that when there is an image of my mother.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And I realized that if I went through that, I will hurt her so much and she will be in so much pain. And I realized I cannot do that to her. I need to get better. And so now it's the same thing, everything that I do has a purpose. And right now my purpose are my family, my children, they're my anchor.
Yeah.
So that allows me to do things for them. It's less about me, but about them.
Yeah.
So those are the 5 pillars,
Love it.
Number 1 is embrace the suck, face your fears, build relationships, unlock your inner strength, and find purpose.
Oh, I can't wait to put all that in the show notes.
But if you think about that, everybody has those components at one point or another. The key here is to put them together.
Right. And to have the context for it, to really be able to understand yourself enough to put that into context. And I think most people can. Sometimes people don't, like we said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes you're acting from a place of fear. Like when I hear someone say, I didn't have a choice, I think sometimes it's more like I was afraid is the underlying thinking, but they're not even cognizant that they're really afraid of something. So they'll just say they didn't have a choice. And I'm not saying that it's because they're so unaware. It's just that they're really just blocking it out. But I think having this in a framework like this, in perspective, somebody can work through it in a way and put those building blocks together if the desire is really there to move forward. And I think that most people want that for themselves. They want to be that learning person to move forward with. So you've given us a lot to work with here between the process, the commitment, the persistence, and optimism, those components.
Those are the drivers.
Those are the drivers.
The pillars. And then when I coach people, I don't tell them, oh, well, I want to work on a framework of resilience. I just listen to them and I know exactly what they need. They need to build a
Yeah.
relationship. They need to face their fears. They need to embrace the suck. They need to find some purpose. One of those is going to help everyone.
Right.
And as we go through life, I think that if we work on those five, we're going to be, I consider myself a resilient human.
Mm-hmm.
And I do that intentionally
Yeah.
because I want to adopt the identity of a resilient individual.
Well, I think you are the resilient individual. I don't think I've known you for a while and I see it. I see it all the time and I see how you're growing and learning as well. I think that's the desire to grow and learn as you go is important. Is there anything else that you'd want to share with our listeners about your book, about your work that you'd like to make sure that they know before we wrap up here?
I think that the big message, the book has two components. Number one is that we already have everything that we need to get started.
Yeah.
And number two is that in order for us to act differently, we need to think differently.
Yeah.
And for us to think differently, we need to see differently.
Yes.
So things have a different perspective, and we need to be relentless about asking for feedback and perspectives, because we have our own way of see things, and sometimes other people have a different way of see things. And when we do ask for that, then we'll be able to see the opportunities and see things differently.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because, to take the advice to try to see things differently and then think differently is one thing. To include other people in that process is critical.
Oh, yeah.
And I think too often we have a tendency to try to just do it all ourselves. And I think we're only getting a partial picture when we do that. And I just want to encourage people to, that a big part of seeing things differently and doing things differently or thinking differently is to get other perspectives. It doesn't mean you have to agree with all of it. You still have a choice what you do with that feedback. That's the choice part. But by getting that feedback, it gives you more to work with. And that's part of that choice, but it also makes for a richer picture. And that's a big part of working from the inside out. And it's a big part of really, I think, building your own resilience too.
I think that, we need to be relentless about asking for feedback.
Oh, yeah.
To know, I read this, I don't know what I read it, but it's something along the lines that to know myself, I need others. We need others to know ourselves because they have a perception, they have a view of us that we cannot see.
Yeah, I agree.
So, but thank you so much for having me, Jamie. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate having you. And I encourage people to get their hands and their eyes on the book, Ordinary Resilience, Rethinking How Effective Leaders Adapt and Thrive. And the show notes will have all the different ways you can reach Luis if you want to learn more about his work. There you go. And you can also find him on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter or X as we call it, and velascoaching.com. We'll have it all in the show notes. So thank you again, Luis. It's been a joy and a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of my interview with Luis Velasquez. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 269. And while you're there, you can also subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. Did you know that ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts can help this podcast reach more people? Please help me to inspire more people to move their careers in meaningful directions by clicking on the Apple Podcasts button and leave an honest rating and brief review. I'd be ever so grateful if you did. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out. Break through 9 common obstacles and design a career that fulfills you. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. You can also help sustain this podcast by buying me a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, your support is acknowledged and appreciated. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.